Electrocast.
There's a change happening in the way we live, the way we work, the way we spend our money and make our decisions. We are evolving to be more conscious in our actions in a way that serves the world and makes it a better place. Welcome to the Ethical Evolution. The Ethical Evolution podcast is brought to you by Ethical Change Agency. I'm Bindi, I'm the founder, and my mission is to help ethical entrepreneurs and holistic healers to find their voice through spiritual coaching and podcasting. I'm honoured to bring you the stories of those who create change through healing, kindness, innovation, purpose, and spirit. Understanding that to create collective change, we need to be the change. It all begins with us. Joe Reichert is a TEDx speaker, program manager, leadership consultant, coach, and also an upcoming author based in Denver, Colorado. He also has a podcast called More Wiser. Join Joe and I as we explore the myths of being a leader and what it takes to lead people effectively in today's workplace. Welcome, Joe, to the Ethical Evolution.
Hey, Bindi, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited.
Me too. Now, you're joining us all the way from Denver, Colorado. And for those people who've been living under a rock and don't know who you are and what you do, can you go ahead and tell us?
Yeah, so I guess for our purposes, I'm a leadership coach. And I would specify that, and I'm really trying to get at people early in their journey. So many coaches, or whenever you see that on LinkedIn, they want to coach executives. There's something prestigious about that. And I go, no, those people are too far gone. The wagon's already left for them. There's no bringing them back if they're bad. I want to get to people early on. And so that's kind of been my mission lately. And so, before we got on, we were talking about my TED Talk, and I just wrote a book too. And I've just really gotten passionate, outside of my career as an engineer in trying to teach people how to become the leader that I really respected and looked up to. Because whenever I was in a training or something like that, I always left going, I'm no closer to being that person. And so, for the last maybe 2 years, I've really just been putting all my emphasis into just trying to teach the bare bones of this. And so, any chance I get to talk to folks like you and just, hopefully someone out there takes something away from this and is able to bring that into their team, that's really what I've been up to primarily.
And what I love about you, Joe, is that you keep it simple.
So simple.
You keep it so simple, so easy to understand, but you also like to have a bit of fun, a bit of a laugh, which I'm all about. And, I've watched your TED Talk, and there was so much in that resonated with me. And for most people who listen to the show, I also have a full-time job here in state government. And so I've been through a lot of leadership training and coaching. And one of the things that I guess is one of your key messages in your TED Talk is it's about being a leader, not a manager.
Absolutely. And I think, the biggest misconception was whoever started using leader and manager as synonyms. I get emails at work that say, hello, leaders. And I look at the people on the 2 line and I go, half of these people, I wouldn't even trust to watch my dog, let alone lead our team to do something important. And there's just, there's scummy individuals on there. And I go, you're being called the same thing that I'm working so hard to do. In the usage of that word has just been flipped around. And so now you take a leadership course and you learn earned value metrics, or you learn how to delegate. And I go, that has nothing to do with someone like deep down inside of them deciding, I want to follow that person. And we've really gotten away from that. And I think sadly, it's why so many people right now look to switch jobs so quickly. I think there's just, a tsunami of terrible leaders out there. There's some great ones too, but when you come across a bad one, it's really noticeable. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard. But yeah, the separation between leader and manager, I think, is like in the like in the Matrix, when Morpheus hands Neo like the two pills, it's kind of like that's the first step towards understanding leadership, is to just detach those two words.
Yeah, there is a significant difference between the two. And I guess one of the things that I've learnt through my leadership journey is that for me, it's not about the tasks, it's about the people. My philosophy is always about the people, because if you can get it right with the people, the rest is all just going to fall into place. And that's pretty much the message that comes through and what you're talking about as well. But one of the things that you bring up in your TED Talk is, think about a great leader. Now, for some people, that's a really hard thing to do.
Right.
But, I mean, for you, when you're asked that question, who's the leader that comes to mind for you?
My high school football coach, always. Yeah. Coach Bob DeMeyer, he was phenomenal. And, he's exactly what you'd want your coach to be, right? And ultimately, when I really sat down and thought about what separated him, it was that he cared. You knew that he cared. And that to me is the basic fundamental thing you have to be able to convey to someone for them to even consider you in the running to be a leader. And we could talk about how you earn it, but I think of Coach DeMeyer. I don't know who you would think of, Bindi, but I mean, we all have someone that pops up, I hope. And I think what I talk about in that TED Talk is, if you think about what their title was, definitely wasn't a leader, right? Nobody has that title. And so that was kind of eye-opening to me when I first, had that aha moment, like, oh my goodness, nobody has that actual title.
And I guess for me, what came to mind was more, and this is going to sound weird, is more political leaders, like prime ministers and presidents, particularly for me, President Obama and also Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand. She was incredible. And one of the things that was at the heart of everything that she did was she cared. She cared about the people. They came first.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was special. That's for sure. And you're right. Those people have titles, and I guess maybe just to back it up, your title is really tied to your function on your team. So as a manager, your title is essentially tied to, I'm going to, delegate work. I'm going to set the team's direction. I'm going to, X, Y, and Z. I'm going to make sure people's time cards are approved. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on with it. But then, the title you have is separate from the role you have. So there's a lot of roles you could have. Like jerk is a role you can earn by being, an asswipe. I don't know. Sorry, Bindi, but by being a jerk to people, you can earn that role on your team. If you're a wise guy, right, you can become the class clown in school, even though your title was still as a student. If you're really funny, people go, oh yeah, Bindi's hilarious. Oh, she's the class clown for sure. I'm going to vote for her. Well, leader is a role. It's something that by your actions and behaviors, people go, I'm going to bestow upon you this moniker that only I, as a follower, get to give out because I'm seeing how you're behaving. And I go, okay, you're now a leader. Now you might not do any of those things that I consider to be good qualities of a good leader, and you'll still be a manager and you'll still retain your title. And at work, I still have people that I work with who are, very poor leaders and just not real great to employees. And at the end of the day, they're still a manager and it doesn't change, but nobody considers them a leader. And that's really the difference between roles and functions. And
another thing that I loved what you said was, you have to earn being a leader. Like, people follow leaders, which was the other part that I absolutely love about what you say. And this is something that someone just said to me last week about a trait in me, is that people follow me. And I think one of the things that people, when they leave a job, they don't leave the company or the job, they leave a bad leader or bad manager, because that's the thing that tips you over the edge.
Yeah, I think, money and benefits, there's a percentage, but I think, like you said, a lot of people leave because of poor leadership, and you really do have to earn that with people. And I want to come back to that because, we were talking, I have such a simple brain, Bindi. You'd be terrified if you came in here. And for folks who haven't seen it, I really describe leadership as like a circle pointing to a square. And literally that's, if you can facilitate that arrow with somebody, then you're leading them. But that arrow is something that, in this case, the circle would choose to do, right? They're choosing to go where you are, and you have to facilitate that. And the biggest misconception, especially for executives who maybe have risen up through the ranks, is that what I did yesterday is going to help you today. And it's a lot like eating. If I ate yesterday, you didn't get full, Bindi, right? I can't just like transfer what I did for someone else over to, Larry in accounting. It doesn't really work that way, but we seem to think that, oh, if I did it a long time ago, and maybe you'll get a little leeway doing that, but you really have to do this nonstop. And that's why when I talk to new leaders, I go, just so you guys know, parts of this job are really, hard. And sometimes it sucks. And sometimes I don't like doing it, to be very honest, because you have to always do this with people. You have to always give yourself, always be, looking out for their best interest. Because as soon as you stop, they still have their same basic needs, and they'll just go find them satisfied somewhere else. And then they won't really consider you a leader anymore. So you got to do it like every day.
And that's another thing that you talk about is the wants and the needs of people. And as long as those are being met, they'll keep coming to you and following you for that leadership. And that's just coming back to, taking care of them. Are they happy? Do they have what they need? Are they getting development? Are they actually meeting their performance requirements? And how can you guide them to do that? And if we can just break it down simply, and this is another thing I want to ask you, I've got a million questions swirling around, is do you reckon that some people are just born leaders?
Ooh, I'll say yeah, I will. But I think, some people are born leaders because they do things without thinking that make other people want to follow them. That's how I would answer, because they're so engaged and invested in the well-being of other people that they will become a leader and never intend to be. So like a lot of times at work, you'll have somebody on a team who you'll consider to be a good leader, but they don't have a function that you would normally tie to one. And to be honest, they probably don't even consider themselves one, just because it's not really on their radar, but they're doing all the things right. They're supporting the other people on their team so much because it's just in their DNA that people look up to them. So yeah, I would say you can be born with it, but I don't think there are any intrinsic qualities that are required to become one. So I think anybody could become one. It's just sometimes your personality might predispose you to making it more difficult. Like if you're very quiet, and I know some people out there are very, either they're shy or they don't like to speak up much, or they don't like to have those conversations. It can be much harder for them to grow into someone that people see as a leader because they're really going to have to go out of their shell, and it will probably make them uncomfortable at times. And so if you don't want to go through those moments of, stress on yourself to push yourself, then yeah, it could be harder for some folks than others.
And exactly that. I have seen people who are trying to be that square peg in a round hole, and they're trying to stretch and fit to be that person when it's not naturally in their nature. And it is so awful to watch. It really is. It's really uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah. And, the advice I would give to folks, if you think you have a personality that doesn't fit like you mentioned a president and a prime minister who have very well, established personas. And if you don't fit one of those, that's okay. And I would say, if you're a square peg trying to go into a round one, I would say just make a square hole, because there's ways to convey. So ultimately, I think the key step you need to do with someone is for them to realize they have to have the thought that you care about them. I think fundamentally that is step zero. You need to do that in order to have a connection with someone. And so you can do that in a ton of different ways. And if you're not if you don't have a personality like mine and you're quieter, you can still do that. It's just on your terms, right? Like it might be, especially once you get to know someone, it might be something very small that you could do that would still convey, and you might even not do it directly to them. It might be an action you take that reverberates back to them where they go, oh, the fact that they did that, I can't believe they went out of their way to do that, and we might not have even talked, but it's like, oh, that really means something to me. So there's a lot of ways to do it. And I don't think, folks who go, oh, I don't have, normally you think of folks who are loud, sadly. You think of folks who are going to grab, life by the beanbag, and they're just going to, we're going to get it done. And you don't have to be that person. That's good sometimes for like a manager or a coach or something, but you don't have to be the coach to be a leader. So, I guess if there was a spectrum, you'd have a bunch of functions like coach, teacher, engineer, doctor, nurse on the left. And then on the right, you'd have like the leader role, and it can fit into any of them. And all those people can have different personalities. So it's really what you make it, honestly.
So it's really just making it your own space and making it fit you, I think is probably the recommendation there. And, for those who are developing leaders, what kind of tips would you give them if they're trying to grow and be that leader that people want to follow?
Yeah, first of all, I would throw away whatever textbook or whatever leadership development program you're in. I would say to you, if you've done anything at all in Microsoft Excel as part of your training, you've gone awry. And I started, and people did not like this. And I started one talk the other day where I just asked the group, I said, you don't need to raise your hands, but I'd really be curious to know, answer in your own head, are you a better leader today than when you started the program? And if not, why? Why? And what are you doing here? And the person who had me come in and speak was not happy with me, but it's the truth because, especially as a new leader, you have no idea what's going on, right? And I think most people would agree that it's very daunting, but the thing I would say to someone who's new is don't confuse the job you want with the role you want, because most people who are going into leadership, they're saying, I want to go into management. And those are fundamentally different. And so the first thing I like to tell people is, hey, that's great. You want to become a manager. And it's probably one of the quickest ways to facilitate what you're trying to convey to other people on a team. But there's the leading people is leading other humans, and that's literally all leadership is. And so, you could spend years and years, going to school and learning, what universities have told us is leadership, or honestly, you could just really focus on people and be out of here in 20 minutes and be on your way.
So as a leader, sometimes we feel like we've got to be bulletproof, like people can't see through our armor, we've got to be right all the time. But there's a vulnerability that has to come with being a leader, and there's an authenticity as well. Like you can fake it till you make it, but that can only get you so far, right?
Oh yeah. And people can tell when you're not you, and when you're trying to be someone that you're not, it never goes well. And I think that vulnerability piece is hard for anybody. It's really scary to open up no matter what you're doing, but especially, we'll talk about someone who's in charge of a team. If you have functional authority over people and you're in charge of their day-to-day work well-being, there is somewhat of a separation is the wrong word, but there's a professional boundary there, right? They're not your friends. They're not, they can be your friends, but that's not your first priority with them. And so it can be very hard to be vulnerable. But what I've noticed is that when I do.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. with 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
When I do allow myself to have those moments where, people can really see that, like if I'm frustrated, right? Or I'm going through something in my own life, it's not that you want to bombard them with things, but I think it's important to share pieces of you that they can relate to, because the connection is so important. And if you can't connect with someone, you definitely can't lead them, because without connecting, it kind of skews when you're attempting to lead them, is like, it feels off. Like, am I being used for something? Do they really care about me? And so when they see that you're just a regular person too, it goes a long way, but it is very hard for anyone, regardless of if you're, trying to be a leader or anything on a team, really.
And this comes back to trust as well, doesn't it? Like, you have to feel trusted by your leader and also as a leader. Trust, I think, is a fundamental element in all of this complete relationship. And if you don't have that, it's impossible to lead someone effectively and to have them follow you.
Oh, yeah. And the thing about trust is that I think as leaders, we don't really understand how important the environment is that we create for our teams and the safety that needs to be felt in those situations. And if you're doing things, you might not even realize it, where you're conveying to people that it's not okay to be your true self. It's not okay to express certain types of emotions. It's not okay to do X, Y, and Z. Well, then they themselves will put up an armor and go, well, I don't really feel comfortable in opening up to you. And then clearly you're probably not doing that to them. And so that right there is probably one of the biggest divisions in trust I'll see, is that, the relationship between a leader and the rest of the team has been damaged by things that they don't really realize they're doing or saying, but they're really small and tiny. And it might be like if someone brings to you a small problem, in their real life, and you either don't acknowledge it or you end up saying something that's kind of funky and not quite what you would hope someone would say back, but maybe you're stressed and you didn't even realize you said it. Maybe you're under a lot of pressure and you're normally not a bad person, but it just came out kind of weird. Those really damage the space. So then when you go, okay, everybody, let's come in here and let's all, be vulnerable and we're going to connect with each other. It's like, well, this isn't really an area where I'm okay doing that with you, because you've shown me over and over again that it's really not okay to do that. So as leaders, you really have to understand that, it's like being at a pond. Whether I drop a rock in or I throw one in, regardless, everybody feels the wake. And whether you're doing it or not, it still impacts everyone.
And I guess that comes to, leading by example. If you're a leader who's functioning in a particular way and then you expect people to do the absolute opposite, that makes it a little hard, doesn't it?
It does. And the disconnect there might be that person might not even realize what they truly want out of their team, because they're so focused on results. And usually that's honestly what it boils down to a lot of times at work in organizations, is you're so pressed to make sure you meet your deliverables. We've got profits and losses, and we've got to ensure we're, doing all of these things and the stresses that build up. And so you might not even be self-aware enough to realize, all of the soft skill type things you want out of your team. You're just pushing them results. And that is, honestly, I think that is probably one of the hardest things for new leaders, going back to people who are new, is when you get put into a position of functional authority and you're the boss, but you understand, maybe let's say you're young, you understand the people aspect and you have high levels of empathy. In your brain, you come up with this kind of Grand Canyon divide. I either have to put my manager hat on and be the big boss for a minute, or I'm going to stay the leader and be people's friends. And that right there, that honestly, going back to the new leader thing, that's probably the hardest thing for folks to do, is to navigate. Now I have two purposes on my team and I have to do them simultaneously all the time. I can't shelve being a leader and be a jerk for a minute, and then, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to be back to being a leader, or I'm going to be a pushover because I want you to like me and I want you to keep following me, and I'm not going to push the team toward deliverables, and I'm not going to hold people accountable. So recognizing you have to do both is super hard, especially for new folks.
And, this leadership stuff, it's not easy. It's hard work. It is hard work, and it takes some practice. You're not going to get it right the first time or the second time or every time. And this is where we learn from our mistakes. But I think we need to understand that this can be a really stressful environment as a leader. You're dealing with people and their problems. You've got to make sure that you don't hold on to those and that you can help them move through them. But you've also got to look at performance, you've got to look at deadlines, you've got to look at workload, you've got to look at all of this kind of stuff. But if you focus too much on one area, you can actually lose that connection with your people. And that's where things can start to fall apart.
Absolutely. And, you really have to come back to, when you're in those situations, those stressful moments, you have to kind of reset and go, well, why do people choose to follow me? And in my talk, we mentioned it briefly, I kind of boiled it down to, you got basic needs and then the stuff you want to do, right? And so you can't be successful and stay in level 2 unless your level 1 needs are being met. And so and I think a lot of people kind of inherently know this, they just don't realize that type of division. And so they'll go, well, gosh, I want these people to still consider me a leader. I want them to follow me, but I have to break bad news. How do I do that? How do I have a tough performance review with someone and still maintain being a leader? But what you need to remember is people follow you because they're in a better position to have those needs and wants met. They don't follow you because you'll meet them for them. And that's a key difference, because if you go, well, I can't give this person a promotion, now they're going to hate me. It's like, no, well, that's not really accurate. It's how you convey it, because you can still send the message that I care about you. I want you to advance in your career. We have areas to work on, and this can still be something you can accomplish. And they can leave that meeting and go, oh, okay, Joe still, Joe cares enough. I might disagree with him that, I'm not ready for this promotion, but he's still conveying to me that I'm a priority. I'm a valued member of the team. And how you go about having those conversations, especially when you're stressed, really says a lot about you. And what I tell people is that, you're really actually pretty versed in this, even if you don't think you are, because it's a lot like having those tough love conversations with family members, right? You don't walk into those, you don't bust in the door and go, listen up, idiot, here's all the reasons you're wrong. No, you go, hey, just so you know, I care about you, and where this is coming from is a place of love, but I do have concerns about, maybe your behavior or, how you're interacting with others. And I want to have this talk, but I want you to remember that this is coming from a good place. And all of those nuances that you put into a conversation like that, those are the same ones you put into difficult conversations as a manager. Hey, I know this promotion is something you really want, but you're not quite ready yet. That doesn't mean you're not still a valued member. That doesn't mean I don't care about you on this team. And it doesn't mean you might still not get there. It's just right now at this moment, it's not the right time. And so it's like in those moments, how you have those conversations is really kind of what separates like the great leaders from like the average ones.
Yeah. It's putting that sugar on what we call a shit sandwich sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, I could talk to you all day, Joe. Like the questions I have, I reckon we could just chat all day. But what would you say is the most important thing for a new leader to remember when they're under stress and they just want to make sure that they get things right?
It's not about you, and it's never about you. And it's hard to hear it like that, but your duty to your team as a manager and a leader has usually nothing to do with you. And so many times I heard a great saying once, and it's a little sidetracked, but it was the weight method in meetings. It was, why am I talking? And it's so great. And I wish more managers lived by that, but it's not about us. It's not about our baggage. It's not about, what we're going through. It's important to be vulnerable and to, be open with your team, but ultimately your job is to support and facilitate other people. And so it's never about you. It's never about you. And it's so hard because all we think about every day is us, right? Like you go home, you think about you. Guess who else is thinking about you? Not many people, because they're thinking about themselves, right? Everybody just thinks about themselves all day. But when you're on a team, especially if you're trying to be a great leader, you're thinking about other people constantly. And that's kind of why leadership gets compared to parenting, right? And if you don't have a good definition of what leadership is, you'll read a lot of comparisons to parenting. And I think that comes from that unconditional wanting what's best for someone. Like as a good parent, you, no matter what, want what's best for your kids. And as a good leader, no matter what, you just want your team to succeed. Now, I'm not saying you should treat them like children, but I think that's why sometimes you end up feeling this almost like maternal or paternal bond with your team, because you really just care what's best. And a great leader, like a parent, will go, sometimes, it is time for you to leave the nest. Maybe this team isn't, what's best for your career. You might be amazing at your job, and we will take a severe hit in productivity and morale when you leave. But ultimately, I'm looking out for you no matter what. And that right there, I think, is why it gets compared to parenting. And I think ultimately it's something that new leaders, they start to feel. And I think it makes them uneasy. Like, oh, I feel like I'm the parent of the team, but I'm only, especially if I'm new, I'm in my 20s. It's like, that's a normal thing to feel, to be honest.
And it's funny you say that, because just yesterday I was saying to someone, we've got to treat people like kids. We really do. Because some of the stupid things they do sometimes, seriously. One of the other things I'm curious to talk to you about, Joe, is recognition. Because sometimes we go a little too far with recognition. Like look at kids nowadays, they get recognised for everything just for showing up, But there comes a fine line, I think, in terms of recognition. I mean, you can praise someone and, we can come back to the enforcement of behaviours, just like you do for a dog. They do something great, you praise them. But there comes a point where there's a little bit too much of that. How would you say is the best way to recognise someone without it being too much?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah. I think, well, at least where I work, I actually don't think that we're overdoing it on recognition. So I think maybe I would separate it from because I do think in the business world, sometimes most managers take too many things for granted, like too many performance things. Now, I don't think that's to say throw a party for everybody or they need, monetary awards. But I think maybe the goal here is, or the key here is, it's smaller and it's more frequent and it's more natural. So, I mean, thank you goes a long way. And recognizing someone, honestly, this is a sad statement. I can't remember when the last time my boss thanked me for doing a good job, which either means I'm terrible at it or, they have room to grow. But there's something to be said about just getting a thank you. And especially, I love a thank you in an email. I save it. I have a folder on my computer that says emails to save. Boom, I'll pop it right in there. And it's just little things like that. And I've had people tell me afterwards, hey, you made my week, just so you know, by doing that. And I went, you just made mine, because that feels good. And there is the side, being a leader in the community and trying to go overboard and recognizing people, which I think is more the question you were asking, especially, maybe like youth sports and things like that. And everybody gets recognized. I think, for the folks who lead those organizations, I would just come back to, what's the goal of having that league? Let's say it's a baseball league. What's the goal for all of those children? If it's for them to grow and feel good and secure about themselves, then I would ask, do you need to give everyone a trophy to instill that? Will that wash away quickly? Would you be better off coaching the coaches who go with those teams to have them better lead those, their boys and girls that probably at this age, and have them have those larger takeaways than just a piece of hardware? So I think maybe it has to start way higher up, and you really got to identify, well, what the heck's the point? What are we doing here? And if a piece of plastic would honestly make it better, then sure, but I doubt most of the time it would.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I have a habit of, it's just a habitual thing for me. I do thank people, on whenever they do something, and also let them know that I appreciate them and what they do. And just the other day, we'd had a really big week, and there was a new guy in the team, and he was really stepping up. And I just said, mate, you know what? If nobody's told you today, you've done an amazing job. And everybody around me heard that, and they just turned around and they went, yeah, we agree. So it was like that sharing praise in a public setting. It's almost like it grows like a little virus. It's like, woo, and that can change the whole tone, the whole energy in a team, I reckon.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so happy you said that, because that is like the epitome of an indirect action. So what I wrote in my book that'll be coming out soon is that there's two types of actions. There's the direct things that, I could do to you, Bindi. Like I could say, hey, you're doing a great job, right? Or I could give you a gift, or I could do something else. And that's direct me to you. But what you said, when everyone else heard you say it, that turns into an indirect action for your whole team. And that right there is like the biggest mystery, unsolved, ancient ruins of leadership right now, is indirect actions, because the people who fall prey to this the most are the ones who are in charge of all of us, the executives, and they don't understand that your actions reverberate. So when you say thank you and people hear it, they go, you know what? I'm going to be a little bit more grateful today with other people. Or like a silly example, you hold the door open for someone, 2 people away sees you do that, then they do that for someone else. It's like a chain reaction all throughout the system. And so when you really understand the true ripples of your actions and the way they indirectly impact people, A, it's scary because you realize, oh, it's always happening. But B, you can kind of, I don't want to say cheat the system, but you can have a huge impact on a team really quick, because you go, oh, if I just do the right things right, they will reverberate. People will recognize, even if they don't acknowledge it, it's still being felt. And another way is, like, say you and I interact and you do something great for me, and then I get put in a better headspace, or I'm feeling better about myself, and then I go talk to someone else. That's also an indirect action. And so as leaders, you got to always remember, the pond is huge and the ripples go out very far. And you can make such an impact, especially as someone new. I know we keep coming back to new leaders. You can really have like a huge, I'll use the word impact again, on the team you're a part of quickly by doing this. But you might feel like, oh, it's not really working. I'm only changing the lives of like 3 people. It's like, oh, I bet if you took a poll, it's more than that. If you're doing a great job at it, it might be 10 times that.
And on the flip side too, Joe, that if you have bad behaviors, they can also ripple as well. So, say you snap at someone in a public setting in front of others, that's going to ripple as well.
Oh, yeah.
People are going to pick up that energy and they're going to go, what the hell is going on over here?
Oh, yeah. You're always on. You're always on. It's like a coach. It's like if I saw, Coach DeMeyer, I would call him coach. If he did something, it would still impact me, positive or negative. As leaders, you're never not on. You can never call time. You can never go like a timeout. I'm going to be a jerk or an idiot for a minute, and then I'm going to call off time, and then I'm going to go back to being myself. It's like, no, sadly, it's really difficult because you never get to turn it off. And I think sometimes, to be candid, being a manager, being a leader can be kind of lonely. It can be a lonely position because you're normally not around peers. You're normally around the people that you're leading, and they can be your friends, but like I said, there's that professional boundary. And so you can never fully let down the armor, as we were going back to, because you are there to support them. And it's not really fair for them if you're gonna if you're gonna, say something that's really crappy to someone and snap and oh, I didn't mean it. It's like, well, that's okay. You didn't mean it, but it still impacted everybody. And like, if you were with your friends, it wouldn't really matter. You could do that and whatever. But when you're with the people that you lead, it really makes a difference. And it can, like you said, it can have a very negative wake that extends far beyond that one interaction.
And I guess it comes back to being conscious and being self-aware. And as a leader, you've got to be switched on. You've got to be conscious of your actions and behaviours and how they impact others, and also what comes out of your mouth. You have to think before you engage. And one of the things, there's two things I like to do to switch me into that space. And one is, before you react, before you do anything, take a breath. Take a breath.
Yeah.
The other thing before I start my day, or if I'm trying to get into that headspace, is I think of it as almost like putting on a jersey, right? It's like putting on a jersey and it's like, I'm going to be my best self today. So it's a matter of, okay, what does my best self look like? And that's basically how I go about it. And it's like, that's all she's wearing today is her best self.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's why, honestly, I wear a tie when I go to work, and having that thing choking me all day is a pretty good reminder that I am being looked at constantly for support and guidance and for direction. And that, it's a silly thing, but when I'm in my quote unquote uniform for work, it's hard to forget that you're in that really stuffy, suit jacket. And so I think recognizing that that you don't get to take a minute, to just, shout out whatever you want or do something like that. It's important, but also to go back to what you said, to recognize when you're having a day like that, though, is really profound. If you can, no one expects anyone to be perfect every day. And I tell people, you're going to have off days. I have them all the time. But the key is, if you can be self-aware enough and conscious enough to identify it in yourself, you can mitigate it from seeping into conversations or how you interact with others. Because the worst thing in the world is for someone to leave an interaction with you and go, well, clearly I did something wrong because Joe was just however he was towards me. They obviously don't know everything else that's going on with you. But if you can go, something's off, you can go, I'm going to put on my cheery face and we're going to try to get through this. Or B, which I am guilty of this all the time, I'll just reschedule a meeting. I'll just go, if I'm in such a bad space where I really think I would risk taking it out on someone, and it's not often, but it does happen, I'll go, hey, sorry, something popped up. I got to reschedule. And they don't know, but I know that I'm just not right. And I don't want to take it out on you.
And that leads me to the last big part of this beautiful puzzle piece, Joe, and that is self-leadership. We can lead others, but leading ourselves is probably the most important part.
It is. And it's so hard because you only answer to you. And it's pretty easy when you're at work because it's pretty defined what you have to do and you're held accountable by other people. But leading yourself, it's cliched, but like if you cut a corner, nobody knows but you. If if you don't hold yourself accountable for how you acted during the day, you can just kind of skate by, but you'll know deep down if you really want to look at yourself. And if you don't do that, the next time it won't change and you'll just keep repeating those habits. And so self-leadership is really just about having those really honest, cringeworthy looks at how you interacted with someone during the day and go, am I happy with that? Do I like what came out of that? Do I like the outcome? Would I be proud of, first of all, would I be happy if someone did that to me? Would I be proud if, that's how my kid acted to someone else? And that type of accountability is crucial. And I think self-awareness might be one of the most important aspects for a leader because nobody's perfect, like we said, but if you're self-aware enough to work on it, that's really all you can ask for. And if I know someone is that way, or I can tell that they're working at this, I'll give them some slack. I'll go, hey, I know you stepped in and I know you said something that was, not quite right, but I can see you're trying. I can see that you're improving, and that goes a long way in fostering those relationships.
Joe, I could, like I said, I could go on all day, but I think people need to get in touch with you. And if they want to do that, where can they go?
Yeah. So I'm anti most social media, but you can reach me. You could go old school and you can email me, Joe Reichert Leadership @gmail.com. My name is probably in, the title of this podcast. So I won't even spell it, but reach out and send me an email. And I'd love to chat about whatever you're going through, because nothing makes me happier than when I talk to somebody. It's like teaching. When you talk to somebody and then they go, oh, now I get it. Now I get what's going on, or I get why this happened, or I get X, Y, and Z. And it feels good. And there's nothing better as a leader than leaving an interaction and going, they're going to go do that for someone else. And then it just spreads. So yeah, you can email me. That would be perfect.
Now, you've also got a podcast, am I right?
I do. It's called More Wiser, and I interview former TED speakers on their ideas. And so I'll pick someone's brain on why the dinosaurs go extinct, or, how do we stop big tobacco, or, how do you let go of an old relationship that you're still hanging on to? And so it's selfishly, I just like TED Talks. And so I thought, I'd love to talk to those people. And so this is a way to do it. And so, yeah, it's called More Wiser. Thank you, Bindi. I appreciate that.
I love that concept. I absolutely love it. Answering all the big questions.
Yeah, or at least scratching them enough to give you something to think about on the commute to work.
Yeah. Now, you were also saying you've got a book also.
Yeah, it'll be coming out later this year. It's called Leader Relativity. And if you watch my TED Talk, it's kind of the underlying theory. And honestly, it's just meant as like the basic primer. It's really what I wish someone would have given me, because there's so many amazing books out there, and there's so many great theories. But I kind of wanted, what would I tell somebody if I had 5 minutes? If you gave me 5 minutes, what would I tell that person before we set you loose? That was the whole premise of the book. And also, I kind of talk about how scary it really is, because, we didn't go into a lot of it, but when you're first starting, it's terrifying because you don't know what you're doing. And usually there's nobody to turn to because you're now the boss. And so that's kind of the reference that I wrote it in.
Love it. Now, I got the last big question for you, Joe. You ready?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. What's the change you'd like to see in the world, and how can we bring it to life?
Ooh. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna give a very specific one. And I'm gonna shout out to my friend Karen Faith, who gave an amazing TED Talk. The change I would like to see is everyone to watch her talk. It's phenomenal, Bindi. And if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. It has to do with empathy and expressing welcome to other people. And I think in today's climate, I live in the United States, it's very polarizing what side of the aisle politically you're on. And it bleeds into so much of the real world. And I think if we all just took a second and went, where are you really coming from? And why am I feeling how I am about you? Do I believe it? Is it true? And then you can do that for your own self too. So yeah, I would love everyone to watch her talk. Why not? I'll make it instead of, world peace or something, that high level, go watch Karen's talk. It's incredible. It's called How to Talk to the Worst Parts of Yourself.
Ooh, love that. I'm going to go check that out. I was just on LinkedIn before, and I think I saw it on your profile. So I'm going to go watch that. So yes, thank you for that recommendation. Joe, I have loved every single second of this. Thank you so much for being a part of the Ethical Evolution.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and for, allowing folks like me to come on and hopefully make the world just a touch more ethical and better. Thank you, Bindi.
Thanks for listening to the Ethical Evolution podcast. If you're ready to be the change and would love to work with me on finding your voice through spiritual coaching or creating your own podcast with impact, visit ethicalchangeagency.com.
Welcome to Ringside with Ray and Prince. My name is Ray Leonard Jr.
Oh, is that the set? No, that's just my dad.
My name is Prince Daniels Jr.
Daniels again with a big home touchdown.
On this show, we come to humanize
athletes, entertainers, business executives. We're going to see what makes them tick.
Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific time on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll see you there. Peace and power.
Electric acid.
Introducing the Deep Leadership Podcast. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former submarine officer who spent 22 years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Deep Leadership is real-world, actionable leadership advice from John and his expert guests. Become a leader worth following. Subscribe today.
Electric acid.